Elena Moore sat in the dark office of Moore and Associates, the dim light from her computer screen casting shadows on her face, highlighting the dark circles beneath her eyes. On her desk sat a stack of warning letters from the bank, overdue bills, and an old newspaper with a headline that felt like a knife to the heart. Moore and Associates drowns in failed investment. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, trying to hold back the helplessness choking her chest. 5 months ago, Elena had bet the future of her firm on an investment fund she believed could revive her dream. A sharp attorney, she had analyzed every clause, evaluated every risk, but she hadn't foreseen the deception. The fund was a trap, and now her firm, the product of years of relentless work, stood on the brink of bankruptcy. She had poured her personal savings into paying staff salaries, keeping the lights on, but it still wasn't enough. Her mother's hospital bills at St. Mary's and her younger brother Ethan's tuition at Yale felt like heavy stones crushing her shoulders. She closed her eyes, picturing her mother's faint smile in the hospital bed, her hoarse voice whispering, "You make me proud." Then Ethan, always trying to make her laugh, even when he knew their family was struggling. Elena had sworn to protect them, to never let money define who she was. But now she had only weeks before the bank seized her office, before her dream slipped away. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. Mia, her assistant, poked her head in, her eyes glinting with curiosity. "Ms. Moore, someone from Blackwood Enterprises is here. He says it's urgent. No appointment." Elena frowned. Blackwood Enterprises, the financial empire that every lawyer both admired and feared. She smoothed her hair, took a deep breath to steady herself. "Send him in." The door opened, and Adrian Blackwood stepped inside. He wore a black suit, his piercing blue eyes scanning the small office like he was evaluating merchandise. He was tall, but it wasn't his height that made Elena uneasy. It was his overwhelming presence, like everything around him was meant to bend to his will. "Attorney Moore," Adrian said, his voice deep and steady, "I have a proposal. Sit down." Elena crossed her arms, standing tall, eyes locked on his. "This is my office, Mr. Blackwood. If you have something to say it, but keep it short." A ghost of a smile flickered on Adrian's lips, cold as winter wind. He pulled out a chair and sat, his movements unhurried, as if he controlled time itself. "I like directness." "Good. I need a wife for 6 months, and I want you." Elena blinked, then let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I'm a lawyer, not a casting agent for your publicity stunt. If this is some PR ploy, count me out." "This is no stunt," Adrian replied, sliding a folder across the desk. "Marriage contract, 6 months. You'll live with me, appear publicly as my wife, and maintain absolute discretion. In return, I'll pay a large sum, enough to save your firm and more. The money will be transferred upon signing." The phrase, "enough to save your firm," made Elena's heart pound. A large sum, enough to pay off the bank, keep the office open, cover her mother's hospital bills, Ethan's tuition, and maybe give her a chance to start over. But she quickly regained her composure, pushing the folder away like it was dangerous. "Why me? Blackwood Enterprises has a whole team of attorneys. I'm sure you're not short on volunteers." Adrian tilted his head, studying her like an unreadable book. "I need someone who fits my image. You're a talented attorney, known for your integrity. No scandals, no social climbing. Your reputation, strong, independent, is exactly what I need to convince the board." He paused, his gaze sharpening. "And I know your firm is collapsing after a failed investment. You need this opportunity, Ms. Moore. I'm offering you a way out." His words cut like a blade. Elena clenched her fists, trying to keep her voice steady. "You investigated me," she said, her tone low but sharp. "You think you can walk in here, throw money around, and buy my dignity?" "Not your dignity," Adrian replied calmly. "Just 6 months. My father passed away 3 weeks ago. His will requires me to be married to retain the chairman's seat. If I'm not, the board will vote me out. I chose you because you're perfect for the role, on paper and in public." Elena turned away, not wanting him to see the tears threatening to spill. She thought about the sleepless nights, going over the investment documents again and again, blaming herself for being too trusting. She thought about the dream of building Moore and Associates, a place where she hoped to fight for those without a voice. She thought about her mother and Ethan, the people she couldn't let down. And she thought about herself, the woman who once swore she'd never bow to money. But reality is merciless. Her firm was dying. If she didn't act, she'd lose everything. Her dream, her family, even her pride. She turned back, picked up the pen, her hand trembling slightly. If I sign, I want an additional clause. No touching me, no interfering with my work. And when 6 months end, you walk out of my life forever. Adrian nodded as if he'd expected it. Agreed. Elena signed, her handwriting sharp, her heart heavy. She slid the contract back to him, locking eyes with him. Mr. Blackwood, you may be buying my image, but you will never own who I am. He took the contract and stood. For the first time, Elena noticed a strange flicker in his eyes. Not triumph, but something like a question he had never considered. You're wrong, Attorney Moore, he said quietly. I don't want who you are. I only need your shadow. He turned and walked out, leaving her alone with the echo of her heartbeat and the feeling that she had just lost a piece of herself. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Chapter 2. Living with a Stranger. Elena stood in the middle of Adrian Blackwood's penthouse, her entire luggage consisting of a single small suitcase. The apartment was massive, perched atop a shimmering glass tower, offering a sweeping view of the city. The marble floors gleamed, and the silver-gray furniture exuded luxury, but the space felt cold, like a showroom. No photos, no plants, no trace of human warmth. Wrapping her arms around herself, she felt as if she had just stepped into a modern mausoleum. This is your room, Adrian said, pointing toward a door at the end of the hallway. His voice remained deep and sharp, like he was reading a business report. Mine is across the hall. The wardrobe is stocked with clothes for public events. You may use the kitchen and living room, but stay out of my study. Elena nodded without looking at him. Understood. I won't bother you. She rolled her suitcase toward the room, walking stiffly, doing her best to maintain the invisible distance she had created from the moment they signed the contract. This wasn't a home, it was a stage, and she, an unwilling actress, had to play the perfect wife for 6 months. Her room was twice the size of her old law office, with a king-sized bed, white silk curtains, and floor-to-ceiling windows. But she didn't feel comfortable. Everything was too perfect, too foreign, like it had been designed to impress, not to be lived in. She sat on the bed, opened her suitcase, and pulled out a small photo frame. Her mother and Ethan, smiling brightly in the park last year. She placed the frame on the bedside table and whispered, "Just 6 months. Mom, Ethan, we'll be okay." Inside, she knew she was lying to herself. Signing that contract with Adrian wasn't just about saving Moore and Associates from a disastrous investment or earning a large sum to pay off debts and support her family. It meant living with a man who saw her as a tool, not a person. She thought back to the day she signed the contract, his eyes cold, yet flickering with something strange. She wondered if there was anything behind that icy facade, or if it was just her imagination. That evening, Elena stepped into the kitchen, deciding to cook a simple meal to regain a sense of normalcy. She found a pack of spaghetti and a few ingredients in the fridge, likely left by a housekeeper. As the water began to boil, she heard footsteps. Adrian appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled, like he had just come out of a long meeting. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine surprise. "Cooking," Elena replied without looking up, continuing to stir the pot. "Want some?" "Just spaghetti with tomato sauce. Nothing fancy." Adrian frowned as if the concept of cooking was completely foreign to him. "I have a private chef. You don't need to do that." "I'm not doing it for you," Elena said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm doing it for me. If I have to live here for 6 months, I need to feel human, not like a decorative object." She poured the pasta onto a plate, added sauce, and sat at the dining table, ignoring him completely. Adrian stood there watching her. For the first time, he noticed something. Elena wasn't trying to impress him. No flattery, no nervousness, no awe that he was the CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. She ate her pasta, eyes focused on her plate, but there was something natural about her that he couldn't look away from. He thought about the women he'd met, always seeking his approval, always seeing him as a prize. But Elena, she looked at him like a stranger, and that made him uneasy. "You're not like most lawyers," he said suddenly, sitting down in the chair across from her. Elena paused her chewing and looked up. "What do you mean?" "Lawyers are usually calculated, cold. You're making pasta in my kitchen like this is your home." His voice held a hint of teasing, but his eyes were serious, as if trying to figure her out. Elena set down her fork and gave a faint smile. "Mr. Blackwood, if you think all lawyers are cold and calculated, then you haven't met someone like me. I work with logic, but I live with my heart. And if you want me to play your perfect wife, then let me breathe. Don't turn me into a machine." Her words left Adrian silent. He looked at her, his gaze flickering. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't trying to please him. And that was new. He stood ready to leave, but then paused, glancing at the plate of pasta on the table. "It doesn't smell bad," he said hesitantly, as if admitting anything at all was foreign to him. Elena pushed a plate toward him, her eyes daring. "Try it. I promise I'm not poisoning you." Adrian hesitated, then sat down and picked up a fork. He took a bite, slowly, as if analyzing every element. "Acceptable," he said, but the corner of his mouth twitched into the faintest smile, almost unconscious. Elena watched him, suddenly noticing how that smile made him seem more human. She quickly looked away, reminding herself, "This is a contract, Elena. Don't forget." But in that moment, she felt a flicker of warmth creep into the cold space of the penthouse. That night, as Elena lay in bed, she thought about Adrian, not the CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, but the man who had just eaten pasta in her kitchen. She wondered if he had ever truly lived as himself, or if his whole life had been a contract too. She shook her head and pulled the blanket over herself, trying to dismiss the thought. But deep down, she knew the walls she had built were beginning to crack. Meanwhile, Adrian stood in his study, staring out at the city through the glass. He thought about Elena, the woman who didn't admire him, didn't fear him, and made pasta like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the first time, his apartment didn't feel like just a place to exist. He shook his head and told himself, "It's just a contract." But a small part of him, very small, began to wonder if her shadow could become something more. Elena stood before the mirror in the lavish penthouse bedroom, wearing a sapphire evening gown that hugged her figure, elegant, strong, and poised. The dress was one of the outfits Adrian had prepared for her, and though she hated to admit it, it made her feel like someone from a dream that wasn't hers. She smoothed her hair and reminded herself, "This is just a role. Don't let it consume you." Tonight she would make her first public appearance as Mrs. Adrian Blackwood at the city's most prestigious charity gala. Adrian was waiting in the living room, sharp in a tailored black suit. His gaze swept over her as she walked in. "You look suitable," he said evenly, though his eyes lingered a beat too long. "Just suitable?" Elena replied lightly but with an edge, offering a faint smirk. "I thought you picked me for the perfect image." She brushed past him without waiting for a response, feeling a flicker of satisfaction when he hesitated. In the car, silence stretched between them, the only sound the quiet hum of the engine. Elena stared out the window as the city lights passed like falling stars. Her thoughts wandered to her law firm, to the exhausting days spent trying to pull it back from the edge after the failed investment. Signing the contract with Adrian had been her way out, but the deeper she went into his world, the more she felt like a bird trapped in a golden cage. She glanced at Adrian. He was reading emails on his phone, face cold and unreadable. Does he ever feel like he's pretending too? She wondered, then quickly pushed the thought away. At the gala, the ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and opulent gowns. Elena felt every eye turn toward them as they entered, her arm lightly linked with Adrian's, just as the script required. Whispers followed them, about her, about Adrian, about their sudden marriage. She kept a flawless smile, though inside she was fighting a battle between pride and the part she had to play. And then she saw her, Vanessa Reed, Adrian's ex-girlfriend, standing amidst the crowd in a blazing red dress like fire. Vanessa was the epitome of high society, wealthy, arrogant, and once the center of attention beside Adrian before their breakup. She approached with a sweet smile and eyes sharp as blades. "Adrian, it's been too long," Vanessa said, then turned to Elena, her gaze scanning from head to toe. "And this is Ms. Moore, right? A lawyer, I've heard. Quite a surprise to see you here, next to him. I thought he preferred women who were more fitting for this world." The surrounding crowd fell silent, listening. Elena felt heat rise in her face, but she wasn't one to back down. She smiled, calm and cutting. "Ms. Reed, I'm not here to fit into anyone's world. I'm here because I chose to be. And as for being fitting, I think someone who once walked away from Mr. Blackwood knows just how hard that is to define." A soft ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Vanessa stiffened, her smile vanishing. The nearby press began jotting notes, cameras flashing. Elena felt Adrian's hand gently tighten around her arm, but she didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Vanessa. "And by the way," she added, "this gala is for orphan children. If you're looking for attention, why not auction something off? I've heard you're quite generous." Vanessa went pale, mumbled something, then turned and left, the crowd dispersing. Elena exhaled sharply, heart pounding. She'd won the exchange, but felt strangely hollow. What am I doing? Protecting my dignity or just playing the part? Adrian pulled her aside to a quiet corner, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," he said, voice low. "Vanessa just wanted to provoke you." "I didn't do it for you," Elena replied, her voice slightly shaking. "I did it for me. I won't let anyone look down on me, not in your world or anywhere else." She turned away, but Adrian caught her hand, his fingers warm, a stark contrast to his usual cold tone. "You did well," he said, and for the first time Elena saw a flicker of sincerity in his eyes. "But in this crowd, they're like wolves. Don't let them see you flinch." Before she could respond, a wave of reporters surged forward, blinding camera flashes lighting up the room. Elena felt overwhelmed, the noise of microphones and questions crashing down like waves. "Mrs. Blackwood, how did your romance begin? Is it true you married for love?" She stood frozen, her smile plastered on, unsure how to answer without exposing the contract. Suddenly, Adrian stepped forward, pulling her into his arms, one hand protectively resting on her shoulder. "My wife doesn't enjoy the spotlight," he said, voice calm but commanding, quieting the press. "She's here because of her heart, not your cameras." He took her hand, guiding her through the crowd, each step building an invisible wall around them. When they reached a quiet balcony, Adrian let go and turned away, as if the embrace had been purely instinctive. Elena stood there, heart racing, not because of the crowd, but because of that unexpected hug. She had felt his warmth, his protection, something she hadn't asked for, but she reminded herself, "Don't be foolish, Elena. It was part of the performance." "You didn't have to do that," she said hoarsely, trying to sound composed. "I could have handled it." Adrian looked at her, his gaze deep. "I know, but I didn't want you to have to." He paused as if surprised by his own words. Then he turned away, leaving her with a storm of emotions. That night, standing on the balcony, Elena looked down at the glittering city. She thought of Vanessa, of Adrian's embrace, of herself, struggling to keep the boundaries she had built. She hugged her shoulders, whispering to herself, "It's just a contract. Don't let your heart get involved." But deep down, she knew something inside her had already shifted. Back in the ballroom, Adrian watched her from a distance. He thought of the moment she stood up to Vanessa, strong, yet visibly wounded. For the first time, he asked himself, who is she, beyond the shadow I need? He shook his head and rejoined the crowd, but a part of him couldn't forget the feeling of holding her, as if, just in that fleeting moment, he wasn't a CEO, but simply a man. Chapter 3. A Dream of a Family. Elena sat in the penthouse living room, her laptop open in front of her, the screen displaying an email from the bank confirming a loan extension for Moore and Associates. A small step forward, but she knew it was only temporary. The firm was still a sinking ship, and her contract with Adrian Blackwood remained the lifeline she didn't want to cling to forever. She clicked the email shut, trying not to think about Adrian's unexpected embrace at the charity gala last week. The warmth of his hand still haunted her, though she kept reminding herself it was just part of the performance. The phone rang, cutting through her thoughts. An unknown number, but the voice on the line, Adrian's assistant, was urgent. "Ms. Moore, Mr. Blackwood's been injured. At company headquarters. It's not serious, but you should come." Elena shot up, her heart racing. "What happened? Is he okay?" She didn't understand why her voice trembled, why she felt worried about a man she considered nothing more than a contract partner. The assistant explained quickly. An elevator accident. Adrian had pulled an employee away before the doors collapsed, but a metal bar had grazed his shoulder. He refused to go to the hospital, just went back to the penthouse, the assistant said, concern in her tone. When Elena arrived at Blackwood Enterprises, Adrian was already in the car, seated in the back. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, stained with a small patch of blood. He was frowning, still trying to maintain control. "You didn't need to come," he said as soon as he saw her, his voice cold but weaker than usual. "It's just a scratch." Elena crossed her arms, her expression stern. "Scratches don't make you go pale, Mr. Blackwood. Get in. I'm taking you home." She climbed in beside him, ignoring his annoyed look, and instructed the driver to return to the penthouse. Once home, Elena practically forced Adrian onto the sofa. She retrieved the first aid kit from the cabinet, her movements efficient, like she'd done this 100 times before. "Take your shirt off," she said, her tone calm but non-negotiable. Adrian raised a brow but eventually complied, revealing a wound on his shoulder. Not deep, but enough to need stitches if treated at a hospital. Elena disinfected the injury, her touch gentle but firm. She could feel Adrian's gaze on her, but she didn't look up. "You didn't need to play hero," she said softly. "That employee would have been fine if you'd called a technician. Why risk it?" Adrian was quiet for a moment before replying, his voice raspy. "I didn't think. I just reacted." He turned his face away, as if he didn't want her to see whatever flickered in his eyes. Elena finished dressing the wound, then noticed his body beginning to tremble, not from pain, but from fever. She touched his forehead, burning hot. "You've got a fever," she said, rising to grab medicine and a thin blanket. "Lie down. No arguments." This time, Adrian didn't protest. He lay on the sofa, eyes closed, his breathing heavy. Elena sat beside him, tucking the blanket around him, then used a damp cloth to cool his forehead. She didn't know why she was doing this, why she couldn't just leave him be. Maybe it reminded her of the nights caring for her sick mother, of how her mother once said, "Taking care of someone is how you keep your heart alive." She shook her head. "This isn't care, it's just duty." Late into the night, as the city lights glowed faintly through the windows, Adrian began murmuring in his sleep. His voice was low but clear, like a lost child's. "Mom, don't go. Don't leave me again." He clutched the edge of the blanket, his face twisted in pain that had nothing to do with his shoulder. Elena froze. She stared at him. The man who always had everything under control, now vulnerable like a boy left behind. She thought about what she knew of him, a father's death, a forced inheritance clause, but no one ever mentioned his mother. She placed a gentle hand on his and whispered, "I'm here. No one's leaving you." She didn't know if he heard, but slowly his grip loosened and his breathing steadied. She stayed with him all night, never sleeping, just replacing the cold compress and watching over him. In the darkness, her thoughts drifted to herself, to the betrayal she endured 4 years ago, when her ex left her for money. She'd learned to lock her heart away. But watching Adrian, she wondered, if he's locked his heart too, who will ever open it? The thought scared her. She stood, walked to the balcony, and breathed in the cold air to steady the emotions surging inside. The next morning, Adrian woke, the fever having broken. He saw Elena sitting in a nearby chair with a cup of coffee, dark circles under her eyes. "You stayed all night?" he asked, his voice hoarse, eyes flickering with something like embarrassment. "Don't flatter yourself," Elena replied coolly. "I just didn't want you dying in my house and voiding the contract." She stood and walked toward the kitchen, but her heart pounded. She didn't tell him about the things he'd mumbled, about the pain she saw. She didn't want him to know she had seen him so exposed. Adrian watched her go, a strange feeling rising in his chest. He vaguely remembered a soft voice in the night, a warm hand. He shook his head, telling himself it had been a fever dream. But when Elena returned and placed a simple plate of scrambled eggs in front of him, he realized something. She hadn't cared for him because he was the CEO, or because of the contract. She had done it because she was Elena. "Thank you," he said quietly. For the first time in his life, the word felt insufficient. Elena shrugged, but her eyes wavered. "Eat, before it gets cold." She turned away, but inside she knew. The line between them had just become a little thinner. That night, lying in bed, Elena thought of Adrian. Not the cold man in a black suit, but the boy who had whispered for his mother. She reminded herself, "Don't let feelings get involved, Elena." But she couldn't deny it. She had seen a part of his true self, and it made her heart ache. In his study, Adrian looked out at the city, his fingers brushing the bandage on his shoulder. He thought about Elena, the woman who hadn't walked away when he was at his weakest. For the first time, he asked himself, what if this contract isn't just a transaction? He shook his head and closed his laptop, but a part of him couldn't forget the gentle voice from the fevered night. Elena stood in the penthouse kitchen, soft amber lighting casting a gentle glow over the dinner table. Just grilled fish and salad, but she'd spent over an hour preparing it. Not for Adrian, she told herself, for me, because I need to feel like I still control some small corner of this life. 3 months had passed since the contract was signed, and while she'd grown accustomed to the cold luxury of the apartment, she hadn't gotten used to the way her heart occasionally skipped when Adrian walked into the room. He had changed, though she hated to admit it. Adrian, once the man who vanished into endless late meetings, now usually came home before 8 p.m. He no longer simply nodded when she spoke, but asked about her day. Simple questions like, "How's the firm?" or "Did you meet with any clients today?" Sometimes he sat across from her at dinner, eating quietly the food she cooked. And in those moments, she felt unsettled, as if the line between contract and reality was slowly blurring. Tonight, as she placed the dishes on the table, Adrian stepped in, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled. He held a bottle of red wine, and there was a flicker of something unfamiliar in his eyes. "I thought maybe we could have a glass," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "If you don't mind." Elena raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Just one. I don't want to get drunk and forget the terms of our contract." Her smile was dry, but inside she wondered why he suddenly wanted to break routine. They sat across from each other, the chandelier's warm glow softening the room's usual coldness. Adrian poured the wine, the crimson liquid swirling like blood. "For you," he said, sliding her glass over. "And thank you for dinner. You didn't have to cook, but you did." Elena shrugged, trying to remain composed. "I did it for me, not for you. If I don't cook, I'll lose my mind in this mausoleum." She took a sip, the bitter taste spreading across her tongue. "And you? What's with the free evening? No board meetings?" Adrian chuckled quietly, the rare sound catching her off guard. "I wanted to stay home," he said, eyes lingering on her longer than usual. "And I wanted to know more about you. Not attorney Elena Moore, just Elena." The words made her heart thud. She turned away, pretending to focus on her plate. "There's not much to know, Mr. Blackwood. I'm ordinary. I don't belong in your world." She thought of her law firm, of the long days spent trying to save it after the failed investment. She thought of her mother and Ethan, those she fought to protect. And she thought of the betrayal 4 years ago, when the man she loved left her for money. Since then, she had vowed never to let anyone near her heart again. But Adrian didn't relent. "Ordinary doesn't mean unremarkable," he said, voice low. "You cook pasta in my kitchen, put Vanessa in her place in front of 100 people, took care of me when I had a fever. That's not ordinary, that's you." Elena looked up and his gaze locked on hers. Not cold, but warm, almost sincere. Her breath slowed, the space between them seeming to shrink. "Don't do this," she said hoarsely. "Don't pretend this isn't a contract." Adrian said nothing, but he stood and walked toward her. He stopped close, too close, his breath brushing her hair. "I'm not pretending," he murmured so softly she could feel each word. "I don't know what I'm doing, Elena, but I know I don't want to look at you like a shadow anymore." Before she could respond, Adrian leaned in, and his lips met hers. The kiss wasn't rushed, wasn't possessive. It was gentle, like he was asking a silent question. Elena froze, logic screaming at her to stop, but her heart, the part she had locked away for so long, answered instead. She didn't push him away, didn't move, just let the moment linger, the warmth of him spreading through her. At last she pulled back, her breath unsteady. "Don't let feelings override the contract," she whispered, her voice fragile, as if trying to convince herself. She looked at him, expecting a scoff or for him to turn cold, but Adrian simply stood there, his eyes deep, as if seeing straight through her. "I'm not so sure anymore," he said, his voice rough, almost pained. "I'm not sure I want this to just be a contract anymore." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, clutching her wine glass, her heart pounding. Elena sat down, trying to regain composure. She thought about the kiss, about how he said her name, not Attorney Moore, but Elena. She thought about the night he had a fever, whispering his mother's name, and the embrace at the gala. Every moment chipped away at her defenses, but she was afraid. Afraid that if she opened her heart again, it would break just like before. She stood, began clearing the table slowly, trying to chase away the storm inside. In his study, Adrian stood by the window, looking out at the city. He touched his lips, where her warmth still lingered. He thought of his mother, who left when he was just a boy, and his father, who taught him emotions were a weakness. He had lived his whole life controlling everything. But Elena, she made him lose control. He remembered her eyes when she pulled back, strong but vulnerable. For the first time he wondered, if this wasn't a contract, would I be brave enough to let her into my life? That night, Elena lay in bed staring at the framed photo of her mother and Ethan. She whispered, "Mom, what should I do?" She knew she was at a crossroads, keep her heart safe or risk it to feel again. She closed her eyes, but Adrian's image didn't fade. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the study, Adrian opened an old drawer and took out a silver necklace, the last gift from his mother before she left. He held it tightly, thinking of Elena. "I'm not so sure anymore," he repeated aloud. And this time he knew. He wasn't just saying it to her. He was saying it to his own heart. Chapter 4. The Curse of Trust. Elena sat in her temporary office at Blackwood Enterprises headquarters, the blue glow from her computer screen casting sharp shadows across her focused face. As a legal advisor, she had been tasked by Adrian with overseeing investment contracts tied to the company's international expansion project. It was part of their marriage contract, a way for her to be useful beyond playing the role of the perfect wife. But today she didn't feel useful. She felt like she was standing before an invisible wall, uncertain whether what lay beyond it was the truth or a carefully constructed lie. It had been 3 days since that moment in the kitchen, since Adrian's lips touched hers. Ever since, Elena had tried to rebuild the boundary between them. Each morning, she avoided his gaze, answered his questions with clipped responses, and ate dinner alone in her room. That kiss, gentle though it was, had scared her. Not because of him, but because of herself. She remembered 4 years ago, when her ex had walked out for a wealthier opportunity, leaving her with a shattered heart and a vow. Never let emotions overrule logic again. But Adrian, with his hoarse whisper, "I'm not sure anymore," was shaking that foundation, and that terrified her. She shook her head, refocusing on the document displayed on her screen. An investment agreement with a Cayman-based financial institution caught her attention. The sum involved was substantial, but the details were vague. No name project, no due diligence report. As a lawyer, she was trained to spot red flags. She opened the data analysis software she'd once used at her firm, cross-referencing figures. After an hour, she found something unusual. A $12 million transfer funneled through 3 intermediary accounts, ultimately landing in an untraceable shell company. Elena's heart pounded. Transactions like these could be legal, but they could also conceal something far worse: money laundering, tax evasion, or something even darker. She printed the file, marked the inconsistencies, and headed for Adrian's office. She needed answers, not just for her job, but because some part of her wanted to believe he wasn't hiding things, that he wasn't the kind of man she feared he might be. Adrian sat behind his desk, the sunlight from the window accentuating the sharp lines of his face. He looked up as she entered, his eyes lighting briefly, then returning to their usual composure. "What do you need, Elena?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. She placed the document on his desk, pointing to the marked section. "This transfer, $12 million, through 3 intermediaries, ending in a Cayman company. No due diligence, no declared purpose. What do you know about it?" Adrian glanced at the file, his expression unreadable. "It's an internal transaction. You don't need to worry about it," he said evenly, though Elena detected a subtle tension beneath his tone. She crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "I'm your legal advisor. If there's risk, I need to know. Transactions like this will draw SEC scrutiny. Do you expect me to do my job without the truth?" Adrian stood and walked to the window, turning his back to her. "I said it's nothing. Just do your part." His voice was cold, but Elena heard it, an edge of avoidance, something she had never seen from the man who seemed to control everything. Her hands clenched at her sides. It felt like a splash of cold water. She had started to believe he was different, that behind his icy exterior was someone worth trusting. But his evasion now felt like a warning, reviving the fear of being deceived. She turned away, her voice quiet but firm. "If you don't trust me enough to tell me the truth, don't expect me to trust you." That night in her room, Elena opened her laptop and accessed Blackwood Enterprises' internal system using the password Adrian had given her. She knew she was crossing a line, but she couldn't stop. As a lawyer, she had learned to seek truth, even when it hurt. After 3 hours of digging, she found a set of encrypted emails. When she decrypted them, her name appeared in several legal documents connected to the transfer. Not as a consultant, but as an authorized representative. She slammed the laptop shut, hands trembling. If the transaction came under investigation, her name would be implicated, without her ever knowing. She thought of Moore and Associates, of the months spent clawing to keep it alive after the failed investment. She had signed this contract with Adrian to protect that dream, to secure money for her family. But now she felt like she'd stepped into a trap, and the man who'd set it was the one she'd just begun to trust. She rose and stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at the glittering city. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Trust is a gift, but also a curse. She had allowed herself to trust Adrian, not just as a business partner, but as a person. The man who pulled an employee from a collapsing elevator. The man who ate her pasta. The man who looked at her like she was the only one in the room. But now she asked herself, what's his truth? And why am I part of this game? In his study, Adrian sat at his desk, his fingers wrapped tightly around the silver necklace his mother had left him. He thought about Elena's question, about the look in her eyes when she left his office. He wanted to tell her the truth, that the transfer was part of a defensive strategy to shield the company from hostile shareholders, that her name had been added to protect her if the plan collapsed. But he couldn't. Trusting someone, for him, meant exposing weakness. It meant repeating the mistake of his mother leaving him. He remembered the way she stood up to Vanessa, the way she dabbed his forehead when he had a fever. She wasn't just a shadow he had hired, she was Elena, and that scared him. He wondered, if she knew the truth, would she stay, or would she leave, like everyone else? He closed the drawer and stood, but the image of Elena wouldn't leave his mind. In the dark, Elena opened the photo frame of her mother and Ethan and whispered, "I'm sorry, but I have to know the truth." She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but she couldn't turn back, not because of the contract, but because her heart, no matter how much she tried to deny it, had started asking, if he's sincere, why is he hiding this from me? Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Chapter 5. The Trap of Trust. Elena sat in the penthouse bedroom, the dim light from the nightstand lamp casting a glow over the documents clutched in her hands. The words on the pages cut like knives. Her name, Elena Moore, was listed on a series of legal documents tied to Blackwood Enterprises investment transactions. Not as a legal advisor, but as an authorized representative. A perfect scapegoat if the Securities and Exchange Commission ever investigated. She trembled, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of betrayal constricting her chest. She had spent the entire day investigating, digging through internal emails and files. The transactions weren't clearly illegal, but they were risky, and they pushed all the legal liability toward her. As his legal wife and in-house counsel, she could be accused of complicity or professional misconduct if this ever came to light. She thought of Moore and Associates, the law firm she had sacrificed her pride to protect. She had signed that contract with Adrian to save it, but now she felt like a pawn in his carefully played game. She thought of her mother, how she used to hold Elena's hand in the small church and teach her that faith in people was a guiding flame, but one that could easily be extinguished if placed in the wrong hands. Elena had started to trust Adrian, not just as a business partner, but as the man who saved an employee from a collapsing elevator, who ate the pasta she cooked, who kissed her like she was the only thing that mattered. But now she wondered, was my faith blind? She stood, gripping the documents, and walked to Adrian's study. He sat there, the light from his computer casting shadows across his face, revealing a rare weariness. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Elena, it's late. What's wrong?" She set the documents on the desk, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "You used my name in these risky investment deals. You listed me as an authorized representative. So if the SEC investigates, I take the fall. Explain that to me." Adrian looked at the papers, his eyes hardening. He stood and walked to the window, turning his back to her. "You misunderstood," he said quietly, but without conviction. "I wasn't trying to hurt you." Elena stepped closer, now only a few feet away. "Misunderstood?" she said, her voice rising. "You hid transactions from me. You signed my name to documents I never saw. Do you really think I'm naive enough not to notice? This isn't about protecting the company, Adrian. This is using me as a shield." He turned, his eyes wavering as if torn between truths. "I trusted you wouldn't betray me," he said hoarsely. "I thought you'd understand. I was trying to protect everything from the predators out there. The board, the shareholders, they want me out. I needed you with me, Elena." His words cut deep, not with anger, but with sorrow. She had entrusted him with something she'd guarded through so much pain, her trust, and he hadn't seen her as a person, just another piece of strategy. She shook her head, tears threatening, but she held them back. "You don't need a wife," she said, voice trembling but firm. "You need a shield, and I thought I was more than that." She removed her wedding ring and set it on the desk. The soft metallic click on the wood sounded like a closing door. Adrian stepped forward, reaching for her, but she pulled back. "Don't," she said, her voice cracking. "Don't make it worse." She turned and walked to the bedroom, pulled out a suitcase and hastily packed a few clothes. When she opened the door to leave, a fax lay on the floor, a notice of preliminary investigation from the SEC. Her name was clearly printed on the front. She picked it up, her hand trembling, then placed it on the table without looking at Adrian, who stood motionless in the hallway. "They know," she said coldly. "Good luck, Mr. Blackwood." She left the penthouse in the middle of the night, stepping into the freezing wind of the city. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away, from the building, from him. She thought of her mother and the times they knelt together in prayer, asking for strength to face darkness. "Mom," she whispered inwardly, "I put my trust in the wrong hands." A single tear fell, but deep inside her, a small flame still burned. The belief in herself and the road she would forge on her own. Back in the penthouse, Adrian stood frozen, staring at the ring on the desk. He picked it up, clenching it tightly until pain shot through his fingers. He thought of his mother, who left him. His father, who taught him trust was weakness. He had tried to protect Elena his way, signing her name to the documents so she wouldn't be targeted by the board if his plan failed. But he had been wrong. She didn't need his protection. She needed the truth. He opened a drawer and took out his mother's silver necklace, gripping it like it could hold him together. He remembered the words of the pastor from that childhood church. True faith isn't control, it's letting go, trusting the truth to lead. He hadn't let go, and now he had lost her. He looked at the facts from the SEC, his heart heavy with regret. She'll never forgive me, he thought, but a part of him still prayed, not for the company, for a chance to make it right. Elena sat in a small cafe, warm yellow lights glowing around her. She pulled out the framed photo of her mother and Ethan and placed it on the table. She didn't know what awaited, investigations, career uncertainty, or the state of her own heart. But she whispered like a prayer, I'll find the way, Mom, even if all I have faith in is myself. She closed her eyes, and in the quiet, she felt something stir, an invisible strength guiding her forward, even as the road ahead was cloaked in shadow. Adrian stood in the silent penthouse, the dim glow of the city casting pale light through the glass windows, illuminating the wedding ring Elena had left on the table. Beside it lay the facts from the Securities and Exchange Commission, her name, Elena Moore, printed like an accusation. She had been gone for more than 12 hours, and for the first time in his life, Adrian felt his world collapse. He had called her, no answer, texted, no reply. The apartment, once cold but warmed by her homemade pasta and quiet presence, now felt like a void swallowing him whole. He clutched the silver necklace from his mother, the only memento from a fractured childhood. He thought of that kiss in the kitchen, of her steady eyes when she stood up to Vanessa, of her gentle voice when she wiped his forehead during the fever. Back then, he believed he was just drawn to her, that she was part of the contract he needed to fulfill. But now, in her absence, he saw the truth with painful clarity. He loved her, not the shadow he hired, not the legal wife on paper, but Elena, the woman who had made his locked heart beat again after years of silence. He remembered the words of the pastor at the small church his mother once took him to. Faith is not about holding on, it's about letting go, to make things right. He had held on to Elena through control, used her name to shield the company, believing she would understand. But she didn't need his protection. She needed the truth, and he had stolen that from her. Love, he now realized, wasn't control. It was the courage to be seen, fully, vulnerably. He drove through the city aimlessly until he found himself in a modest neighborhood. The neon lights of St. Mary's Hospital glowed ahead, the place where Elena's mother was receiving treatment. He didn't know why he was there, only that to find Elena, he had to understand her. Inside, a nurse led him to Grace Moore's room. She lay in bed, wisps of silver hair around her face, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. Mr. Blackwood, she said, voice soft but warm. I suppose you're here about Elena. Adrian stood by the door, fists clenched in his pockets, his voice rough. She's gone. I hurt her. I need to find her. But first, I want to understand who she really is. Grace smiled and gestured toward the chair beside her. Sit. Elena is a child of faith, you know, not just in God, but in people. And that faith has been broken before. She spoke of Elena, the girl who turned down a major law firm scholarship because they required unethical practices. The one who worked day and night to build her own firm, to fight for the unheard. She's walked away from money more than once, Grace said. She wants to stand on her own. When she signed that contract with you, it wasn't for the money. It was for her family, for her dream. Adrian listened, heart heavy. He realized he hadn't just fallen for her strength, but for her heart. A heart that had the courage to give, to believe, even after betrayal. I was wrong, he whispered. I used her name in those deals to protect the company. But I hurt her. Do you know where she is? Grace shook her head gently. Elena will find her way back when she's ready. But if you love her, don't chase her. Make it right first. Faith isn't words, it's action. Her words burned through him. He loved Elena. He knew that as certainly as he knew he couldn't live with her lost forever. Leaving the hospital, he drove straight to the office of James Carver, the former associate behind the Cayman Shell Company. He didn't call ahead. He barged in, dropping the files on the desk. "Re-sign the documents," Adrian said, his voice steel. "Remove Elena Moore's name. Put mine instead. I'll bear all the risk." James raised an eyebrow, smirking. "You've lost your mind, Adrian. If the SEC digs in, you'll lose your chair, maybe even face prison." "I know," Adrian replied, unwavering. "But I love her, and I won't let her pay for my mistakes." He signed each document, the pen in his hand delivering promises, not just of accountability, but of love. When he walked out, dawn had broken, and for the first time in years he felt light, as if the burden he carried had finally been laid down. Back at the penthouse, he sat in the living room, staring at the ring. He thought of his mother, who left him, his father, who taught him control was strength. But Elena, she had shown him that love is the courage to say, "I was wrong," and the will to act for someone else, even when it costs everything. He clutched the silver necklace and whispered, "Mom, I love her, and I'm trying to be worthy." Far from the penthouse, Elena sat in a tiny rented apartment, soft morning light filtering through the window. She opened her laptop and saw the email from Blackwood Enterprises. The documents had been revised, her name removed. Her heart raced. She didn't know the full story, but part of her sensed something had changed. She looked at the photo of her mother and Ethan, remembering her mother's words. "Faith is a flame. It shines brightest after you've walked through the dark." She had walked through darkness when she left, but now she asked herself, if he's trying to make it right, could I believe again? She stepped onto the small balcony, breathing in the crisp morning air. She didn't have all the answers, but she felt something stir inside her, a quiet strength, faith in herself, in the path she'd chosen. She whispered like a prayer, "Mom, I'll find my way, whether it's alone or—" She paused, the image of Adrian flashing in her mind. Back in the penthouse, Adrian slipped the ring into his pocket. He didn't know where Elena was, but he wouldn't stop. He would find her, not to control her, but to tell her he loved her. And with a flicker of hope, however faint, he believed their faith still had a chance to burn bright again. You're watching Soul Stories, created exclusively for our channel. Leave a comment, we read everyone. Subscribe to support more original, heart-touching tales. Thank you for being part of the Soul Stories family. Chapter 6. He came not as a CEO. Elena stood on the stage of the Grand Hotel's Legal Ethics Symposium, the soft stage lights casting a glow on her deep blue suit, highlighting a poised figure tinged with quiet exhaustion. Hundreds of attorneys, judges, and journalists filled the seats below, listening intently as she spoke on professional ethics. "Trust," she said, her voice steady but faintly trembling, "is the heart of justice. But when trust is broken, it leaves wounds deeper than any blade." She paused, took a breath. It felt like she was bearing her soul. It had been a week since she left Adrian's penthouse. Now living in a small rented apartment, Elena was trying to piece her life back together. She knew Adrian had removed her name from the legal documents. An email from Blackwood Enterprises confirmed it. But her heart was still tangled, torn between the pain of being used and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he truly meant to make things right. She remembered her mother's words from the little church they once attended. "Faith is a flame. It shines when you dare to walk through darkness." She had walked through that darkness the day she took off the ring. But the flame within her still flickered, too afraid to fully ignite. She concluded her speech to a resounding round of applause. She gave a faint smile, stepping down from the podium, when a deep, familiar voice rose from the back of the room. "Excuse me, I'd like to say something." Elena froze. Her heartbeat thundered. Adrian Blackwood stepped onto the stage, not in his usual polished suit, but in a rolled-up white shirt, simple, unguarded. His eyes locked on hers, intense, unwavering, as if the entire world had disappeared but for the space between them. Murmurs spread through the crowd, cameras flashed. Adrian took the mic but didn't look at the audience. He looked only at her, eyes glimmering with something raw and vast. Elena, he began, his voice gravelly with emotion. I used to think I could control everything. My company, my life, even my heart. I built an empire, but in doing so, I lost sight of who I really was. I thought love was something I could buy, something I could bind with a contract. Until you walked into my life and showed me love is a flame that can't be extinguished. You, you are the home I never knew I needed. Elena's hands trembled. She fought to keep her composure, but tears welled. She could feel the sincerity behind every word, as if he were unraveling his soul in front of everyone. He stepped closer, every step a bridge between them. I was wrong, Elena, he said, voice unsteady yet firm. I used your name, kept truths from you, because I was afraid. Afraid that if you saw the real me, weak, wounded, you'd leave. But when you walked away, I realized I can't live without you. Not because of the contract, not because of the company, but because I love you. Love how you make me want to be a better man. The room was silent, but for the pounding of Elena's heart. Adrian dropped to one knee in front of hundreds and pulled from his pocket the wedding ring she had left behind. He held it up, the light catching the metal like it carried his love. I don't deserve you, he said, voice breaking, tears streaming down his face. For the first time she saw him cry. But I can't imagine a day without you. Elena, I love you, not as a CEO, not through a contract, but as a man ready to spend a lifetime earning your heart. Please, give me the chance to love you, to be your home. Elena stood motionless, breath caught in her throat. She looked at him, the man who was once so cold, now kneeling before her, fully vulnerable. She remembered her mother's teachings, that faith wasn't just about believing in others, but also believing in your own heart. She remembered the moments they'd shared, his smile while eating her pasta, his arms shielding her at the gala, his fevered voice whispering her name. And she remembered the pain of leaving, but also the quiet hope she'd felt when he began to make things right. She stepped forward slowly, as if every step was a silent prayer. She stopped in front of him, searching his tear-filled eyes for truth. Adrian, she said softly, voice raspy with emotion, I trusted you. And you hurt me. I've been afraid that trusting again would mean losing myself. But she paused, breathing deeply. Something inside her flared to life. But I believe in the love we can build. I believe in my own heart. And I choose you, not because of any contract, but because I love you. She reached out her hand. He slipped the ring back onto her finger. This time, it wasn't heavy like a legal bind. It was light, like a vow written in love. Adrian stood, pulling her into his arms, holding her like she was everything. I love you, he whispered, lips brushing her hair. Thank you for giving me a home. Elena leaned into him, feeling the warmth of something she had feared to believe in. The crowd applauded, but she didn't hear it. All she could feel was him, and the invisible strength inside her, like the flame her mother spoke of, now blazing bright. They left the hall hand in hand, no words needed. As the sun set in the streaks of golden violet, Adrian turned to her, his eyes soft. I will spend the rest of my life keeping this promise, he said, no matter how hard it gets. Elena smiled, tightening her grip on his hand. Good, because I'm not your shield, Adrian. I'm Elena, and I love you too. She felt like she had found herself again, and more than that, she had found home in him. That night in her small apartment, Elena opened the frame with the photo of her mother and Ethan and whispered, Mom, I found love. I hope you're proud. She felt her mother's smile, as if the flame of her faith still lived on in Elena. In the car ride home, Adrian held the silver necklace in his palm. He remembered the pastor's words, true faith is letting go to truly find. He had let go and found Elena, found love. Mom, he whispered, eyes closed. I've learned how to love. I hope you see me now. And for the first time, he felt the darkness within him dissolve into light. 2 years later, the soft autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of Elena's new law office, nestled in the heart of the city. Moore and Associates had become a respected name, securing major contracts from nonprofits and mid-sized businesses. Elena sat behind her desk, reading a thank you letter from a children's shelter she had recently helped win a court case. She smiled, but deep within, what she felt was gratitude, not just for success, but for the journey that had brought her here. Her mother, Grace, had recovered after surgery and now often stopped by the office with homemade cookies, making the staff burst into laughter. Ethan, her younger brother, had just graduated from Yale and was now interning at a tech firm, calling her every week to excitedly share his latest projects. Elena glanced at the photo of her mother and Ethan on her desk, remembering her mother's words in the little church. Faith is a flame. It shines brightest when you dare to walk through darkness. She had walked through darkness, through a failed investment, a contract marriage with Adrian, and the heartbreak of betrayal, and now that flame in her burned bright. She looked up as Adrian stepped in, sleeves rolled up, his gentle smile still capable of making her heart race like it had on day one. He was no longer the cold CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. After the SEC investigation, he had managed to keep his seat as chairman, but had chosen to relinquish some control to focus on charitable projects. "Ready?" he asked, gesturing toward the door. "The kids at the center are waiting." They headed to a children's shelter Elena had provided legal support for. Today was the charity fair, and Adrian, wearing a silly apron, was handing out sandwiches to the kids, while Elena ran a trivia game. Laughter filled the air, and Elena watched him, this man who had once clung so tightly to power, now letting a little girl tie his hair into cat ears with ribbons. She walked over, wiped a dab of frosting from his cheek, and smiled. "You wear this role better than CEO." Adrian took her hand, his gaze warm. "Only when you're here with me." He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead, uncaring of the people watching. She leaned into him, feeling a quiet power, faith in their love, and in the good they were building together. That weekend, they returned to the penthouse, not a cold mausoleum anymore, but a true home. Over the past 2 years, they had renovated it together, replacing marble floors with warm wood, adding plants and colorful drawings from the children at the shelter. Elena stood in the kitchen where she had once cooked her first pasta meal, watching Adrian hang a new frame, one of them at the charity gala years ago, hand in hand. "To remember where we started," he said softly. Elena smiled, her heart pounding. She reached into her pocket and handed him a small envelope. "And this is to remember where we're going." Adrian frowned in curiosity, opened the envelope, and froze. Inside was an ultrasound photo, a tiny life-taking shape, a glimpse of their future. He looked up at her, eyes brimming with tears. "Elena, is this real?" he asked, his voice trembling, barely daring to believe. She nodded, stepping close and placing her hand on his chest. "If I was ever your shield," she said, voice quivering, "then now I'm the one who will protect your heart, and our child's." Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if afraid she might vanish. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, "but I promise to spend my life becoming worthy. Of you, of our baby." He kissed her, tender yet fierce, a vow made without paper or pen. That night they sat on the balcony, gazing out over the glittering city. Elena rested her head on his shoulder, thinking about their journey, from a cold contract to genuine love. She believed now that love wasn't just hope, it was action. It was the choice to love, even after being hurt. And he had let go, surrendered control, and in doing so, found Elena, found family. They sat there, fingers intertwined, saying nothing more. The city below continued to move, but in that moment, there was only them, and a lifetime promise, written in love and growing silently within Elena. The rain poured down as if it wanted to drown the entire world. Scarlett Donovan sat in the rental car, her hands clutching the steering wheel, her vision blurred by both the downpour and the tears she fought to hold back. The symphony music from the engagement party still echoed in her head, tangled with her father's cold voice. "You will marry James." "This isn't a request, Scarlett. It's an order." She had run. Right in the middle of the lavish engagement party at the Plaza Hotel, where chandeliers sparkled and the clinking of wine glasses formed a symphony of power. Scarlett, dressed in a white silk gown worth more than a car, had slipped out the back door without looking back. She took nothing but her phone, a bit of cash, and a heart breaking apart at the seams. Now driving through the back roads of Maine, she had no idea where she was going. The GPS had died over an hour ago, leaving behind only scrambled lines on the screen. The rain blurred everything in sight, and Scarlett felt like a ship lost at sea. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. The heir to the Donovan financial empire, raised to be the picture of perfection, was now fleeing like a criminal. She thought about James, the fiancé her father had chosen. He wasn't a bad man, just empty. His smile was like a business deal, polite, proper, and utterly devoid of warmth. Scarlett had tried to love him, tried to believe that this marriage would bring happiness. But every time she looked into James's eyes, all she saw was herself trapped in a gilded cage where every dream was slowly strangled. A faint light flickered in the distance. Scarlett squinted, heart pounding. A large iron gate appeared through the rain, leading to a gravel driveway. She vaguely remembered booking a small inn online before everything spiraled out of control. This must be it, she told herself, though she wasn't sure. She drove through the gate, the tires crunching on gravel, and in front of her stood an old unlit mansion, looming like a ghost among the trees. Scarlett stopped the car and turned off the engine. The storm roared outside, making her hesitate. She looked up at the towering windows and moss-covered stone walls. It didn't look like an inn. It looked forgotten, but she had no other choice. Her clothes were soaked, her heels were now a burden, and the cold had seeped into her bones. She needed shelter, at least for tonight. She stepped out into the rain, the wind slapping her face like punishment. Scarlett ran to the front door and knocked hard. No response. She knocked again, this time nearly pounding, but only the rain answered. Is no one here? She tried the heavy wooden door, and to her surprise, it creaked open with a long groan, like the house was exhaling. Inside was a wide, dim hallway filled with the scent of old wood and candle wax. Scarlett stepped in, her wet shoes leaving trails across the marble floor. Hello, her voice echoed softly, swallowed by the darkness. No reply. She walked further, heart thudding. A small fire crackled in the living room fireplace, casting flickers of light on the antique paintings along the wall. She paused in front of a portrait of a woman with sad eyes that seemed to stare straight into her soul. Scarlett shivered, not from the cold. She felt as if she had trespassed into a place she didn't belong. Just one night, she whispered to herself. I'll leave in the morning. She peeled off her soaked dress and curled into an armchair by the fire. The flames crackled, offering a hint of warmth, but they couldn't touch the loneliness gripping her chest. She thought of her mother, who died when she was young. Her mother once told her, "Freedom is worth more than any diamond, Scarlett, but you have to be brave enough to claim it." Scarlett never understood those words until tonight, until she stood in this unfamiliar house, no longer the Donovan heiress, but simply a girl searching for herself. She closed her eyes, letting the fire's warmth surround her. But then, footsteps, slow, heavy, echoing from the staircase. Scarlett's eyes flew open. Her body froze. Out of the shadows emerged a tall figure, eyes sharp and cold, locked onto hers. "The Donovan heiress," came a low, ice-cold voice. "What are you doing in my house?" Scarlett felt the blood in her veins freeze. The man stood at the top of the stairs, his tall frame nearly swallowed by the darkness. Only his piercing eyes reflected the firelight from the hearth. His voice, deep, cold, yet strangely magnetic, made her shiver. He knew who she was, the Donovan heiress. How did he know? And more importantly, where was she? She shot to her feet, her soaked dress clinging to her skin, making her feel small and exposed. I'm sorry," she stammered, taking a step back. "I didn't mean to trespass. I thought this was an inn. I'll leave right away." But as she turned, the howling wind outside the window made her freeze. The rain had turned into a full-blown storm, shrieking like it could rip the sky apart. "Leave," the man echoed, stepping down one stair. The dim firelight cast shadows across his angular face, disheveled black hair, a faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. But it was his eyes, deep, oceanic, brimming with secrets that held her. Where exactly do you think you're going in a storm like this? The roads are flooded, and a snowstorm's on its way. You'll freeze before you even reach the gate. Scarlett clenched her fists, trying to steady her voice. I don't need your help. I can take care of myself. But even she could hear the tremor in her words. She didn't know where she was. Her phone was dead. The cold was sinking into her bones. And this man, frightening as he was, might be her only option. He gave a crooked smile, devoid of warmth. Take care of yourself? A little heiress like you, fleeing your palace, thinking you can survive out there? He stepped down a few more stairs, now only a few feet away. Sit down, Miss Donovan, before I change my mind and let you figure it out on your own. Her name in his mouth sounded like an accusation. Scarlett wanted to fight back, to scream that she wasn't the delicate porcelain doll he imagined. But she was tired, drained after hours of driving, and the emotional weight of the party she'd fled. She sank into the armchair, eyes locked on him. Who are you? And how do you know me? He stopped, leaning casually against the banister, as if debating whether to answer. Lucian Vale, he said simply. This is my home. And as for knowing you, who in New York doesn't know the Donovans? The media talks about you like you're the city's crown jewel. A flicker of anger rose in her. You don't know anything about me, she snapped. Don't pretend you understand just because you read some cheap articles. But deep down, unease crept in. Lucian Vale. The name stirred something, a vague memory she couldn't quite place. Lucian raised an eyebrow, seemingly surprised by her bite. He walked over to the fireplace and threw in another log, causing the flames to roar. Maybe I don't know you, he said, his tone slightly softer, though still laced with sarcasm. But I know people like you, raised in silk, then one day decide to rebel, only to realize you can't live without the glow of that golden cage. His words cut deep. Scarlett wanted to scream, to tell him about the prison her father had built, about the dreams suffocated behind her flawless smile. But instead she bit her lip and looked away. You have no right to judge me. Silence settled between them, just the crackle of fire and the wind rattling the windows. Lucian sat in the armchair opposite hers, far enough to maintain distance, but close enough that she could feel his presence. He studied her slowly, as if reading a book he wasn't sure he wanted to finish. Then tell me, he said at last, voice low, why are you here? A girl like you in a dress worth thousands, ending up in a place like this? What are you running from? Scarlett looked up and met his gaze. There was something in the way he asked, not idle curiosity, but a quiet sincerity, like he actually wanted to know. She hesitated. Should she tell the truth? Or keep hiding? But maybe because she was tired, or maybe because she was lonely. She let her guard drop. I didn't want to marry the man my father chose, she said, her voice soft but steady. I didn't want to live a life that was already written for me. I just wanted to be myself, even if it's only for once. Lucian didn't respond right away. He looked at her, his eyes gentler now, as if seeing something in her he hadn't expected. Freedom, he said quietly. You think it's that easy? Just run away and you'll have it? No, Scarlett replied, her eyes burning with determination. But at least I tried. Better than spending my life living a lie. Another pause, then Lucian gave a short laugh, dry but not cruel. You're braver than I thought, Miss Donovan. He stood, walking back toward the staircase. Get some rest. There's a guest room upstairs. If the storm clears by morning, you can leave. Scarlett watched him go, her heart racing with a feeling she couldn't name. Who was he? Why did he live alone in this shadowed mansion? And why, despite his cold demeanor, did she feel an inexplicable connection, like fate had dragged her here for a reason? She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to shake the chill. But deep down she knew, tonight, in this forgotten house, something had begun. 3 days passed, yet the snowstorm showed no sign of ending. Lucian Vale's ancient mansion, with its frigid stone walls and endless corridors, had become Scarlett Donovan's entire world. She sat by the parlor window, watching snow bury the drive that led to the gate, her heart heavy. The freedom she had craved now felt like a hazy dream, imprisoned by the weather and by the presence of the enigmatic man who owned this house. Lucian was more elusive than she'd imagined. He appeared at the most unexpected moments, when she was leafing through a dusty book in the study, or when she lingered too long before the hallway portrait of that sorrow-eyed woman. He seldom spoke, yet every word felt razor-sharp, as if he could see straight through her. What unsettled Scarlett most was how much he already knew about her, beyond her name and the Donovan fortune. He even knew she'd once refused one of her father's major contracts to protect a small charity. "How do you know about that?" she'd asked, voice trembling. Lucian merely shrugged. "I have my ways." Today, with snow still falling hard, Scarlett decided to break the suffocating silence. She found Lucien in the kitchen, slicing vegetables with unnerving focus. The oil lamp above cast warm light across his angular features and the faint scar on his brow. Standing in the doorway, she hesitated, then spoke. "You live here alone, don't you? No staff, no phone, no internet. Don't you ever feel lonely?" The knife paused mid-stroke. He didn't turn, but she sensed tension in his shoulders. "Loneliness is a choice," he said, voice low. "There are worse things than being alone." He resumed chopping, as if her question were nothing more than a passing draft. Scarlett stepped into the kitchen and sat at the old wooden table. "Like what?" She pressed softly yet boldly. "Living in a house full of ghosts, or hiding from the outside world?" This time Lucian looked at her. His deep, unreadable eyes made her pulse flutter. "You speak as if you understand me," he replied, a faint, cool smile on his lips. "And what about you, Scarlett?" "Running from a marriage, from your entire world. What did you expect to find here? Freedom, or just another cage?" His words stabbed with surgical precision. Scarlett felt her cheeks warm, less from anger than from the way he'd pierced her deepest fear. She lowered her gaze, fiddling with a spoon. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I just know I can't keep living the way I was. I don't want to be my father's puppet, or anyone's." Silence draped the room, broken only by the knife tapping the cutting board and the muffled hiss of snow against the windows. Then Lucian did something unexpected. He set the knife down, wiped his hands on a towel, and sat opposite her. "When I was young," he began, voice deep and distant, "I thought I could change everything. I had dreams, someone I loved, an entire future. But life isn't a fairy tale. Sometimes you learn to live with what's left." Scarlett looked up, surprised by his openness. For the first time, she saw a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "What happened?" she whispered. "To the one you loved?" Lucien's gaze held hers a moment, weighing. Then he stood, returned to the vegetables. "Dinner first," he said, voice cooling again. "You'll need strength in this cold." They ate in near silence, but the tension had softened. Over steaming potato soup, Scarlett discovered Lucian was a better cook than she'd guessed. When she praised the soup, he only shrugged, yet she caught a brief sparkle in his eyes, as if he wasn't used to compliments. Afterward, they settled by the fireplace. Scarlett hugged a wool blanket. Lucian held a book he never opened. She tried again. "You never answered my question," she said gently, "about the woman you loved." Lucian stared into the flames for a long time before speaking. "She was an artist," he murmured, grief threading through his tone. "She lived for music, for beauty. But the world isn't kind to spirits like hers. I couldn't protect her." His hand tightened around the book. "That's all you need to know." A stab of ache pulsed in Scarlett's chest, partly for his story, partly because she realized he too carried wounds. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it, "but you can't live in the past forever. Not everyone will leave you." He turned toward her, eyes cutting yet vulnerable. "Easy word," he replied, not with sarcasm but quiet resignation. "And you? Can you truly leave everything, family, status, money behind for a life where no one knows your name?" She gave a sad smile. "I'm trying, but I'm afraid I'm not strong enough." Her confession hovered between them. Lucian studied her so long, her heartbeat quickened. In his gaze, she sensed no pity, only understanding. A spark leapt between them then, not the hearth's glow, but something deeper, more perilous. When Lucian rose and said it was late, that she should get some sleep, Scarlett knew he was keeping his distance. Yet she also knew that whether he admitted it or not, he was drawn to her, not to the Donovan heiress, but to the real woman beneath, scarred and aching for freedom. That night she drifted to sleep with his eyes imprinted on her mind, and with a dawning realization that even if the storm cleared, she might not be ready to leave this place too soon. On the fifth day inside Lucian Vale's mansion, time seemed to stop for Scarlett. The blizzard still roared outside the windows, burying every path, but inside her, another storm was stirring, a storm of unnamed emotions that surged whenever Lucien was near. He kept his distance, yet their brief conversations, their fleeting glances, had begun to melt the icy walls they both had built. That morning, Lucien had disappeared somewhere within the vast estate, leaving Scarlett alone in the grand living room. She sat near the fireplace, flipping through the pages of an old novel, but her mind wasn't in the book. She was thinking of him, of the way he had looked at her last night when she'd confessed her fears. There had been something in his eyes, not just understanding, but a pain he tried to hide. Scarlett wanted to know more, not out of curiosity, but because she felt a strange connection, as if fate had tied them together. She stood and wandered aimlessly through the cold corridors. This mansion, with its ancient paintings and dust-covered furniture, felt like a museum of forgotten memories. She paused in front of a pair of oak doors she hadn't noticed before. A faint sliver of light escaped from beneath them, along with the scent of old wood and candle wax. Intrigued, Scarlett pushed them open. Inside was a large room with towering windows draped in deep crimson velvet. Faint daylight filtered through, illuminating a grand piano in the center of the room. Its glossy surface was coated in a thin layer of dust, as if no one had touched it in years. Scarlett's heart began to race. She had studied piano since childhood, but stopped after her mother passed away. Music had always been an escape for her, but also a painful reminder of loss. She stepped closer, letting her fingers brush over the yellowed ivory keys. A familiar feeling rose within her, as if she were reconnecting with a part of herself long buried. She sat down, drew a deep breath, and began to play. Clair de Lune by Debussy filled the room, its soft, moonlit notes weaving a spell that erased the storm, the weight of the Donovan name, everything. Scarlett closed her eyes and let the melody carry her away. She didn't realize Lucien was standing in the doorway. When the music ended, she opened her eyes and gasped. He was there, still and silent, his dark eyes haunted like a man trapped in a nightmare. His usually unreadable face was now raw, with something she couldn't quite name. "Where did you get the right to play that piano?" he asked, voice low and raspy, like it had been pulled from the depths of memory. Scarlett stood up, her heart pounding. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I just saw it and—" She trailed off, realizing he wasn't truly angry. He was trembling, barely but unmistakably, and his eyes weren't on her. They were on the piano, like it was a ghost come to life. Lucien stepped forward, placing a hand on the piano lid, so gently as if he were touching a wound. "She used to play that piece," he murmured, barely audible. "Every night. She'd sit here, and just listening to her was enough to make me forget everything." A chill passed down Scarlett's spine. "She?" she asked softly, already guessing he meant the woman he had mentioned the night before. Lucien turned away as if unwilling to let her see his expression. "Isabelle," he said. The name sliced through the air like a blade. "She was a pianist. She lived for music, for beauty. But the world never understood her. And then one day, she vanished. No note, no trace." Scarlett didn't know what to say. She could feel his pain in every word, like he was tearing open his chest just to speak. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know the piano meant so much to you." Lucien gave a short, dry laugh. "It's not your fault. I never thought I'd hear that piece again. Not in this room, not after all these years." He turned to look at her, and for the first time, Scarlett saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "You play beautifully, Scarlett, as if you understand it, as if you understand what it carries." His praise made her cheeks flush, but she didn't let herself be swept away. "What happened to Isabel?" she asked gently but firmly. "You said she disappeared. Is that why you live like this? As if you're hiding?" Lucian's hands clenched. His gaze turned distant. "I'm not hiding," he said, but the conviction in his voice had faded. "I just don't want history to repeat itself. Isabel wasn't just someone I loved. She was the reason I believed the world could still be beautiful. When she vanished, that belief vanished too." Scarlett stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough for him to feel her presence. "You can't keep living with ghosts, Lucian," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I know the past can be heavy. I'm running from mine too, but if you don't let it go, it'll drag you under." Lucian looked at her for so long she thought her heart might stop. "You speak like you know how to let go," he said quietly. "But look at you, Scarlett. You fled New York, fled your father, but you're still carrying that cage in your mind." His words hit hard. He was right, and that hurt. But before she could respond, Lucian turned and walked out of the room. "Don't play that piano again," he said without looking back. "Not because I don't want you to, but because I don't know if I can bear it." Scarlett stood alone in the fading light, snow still falling beyond the frosted glass. She looked at the piano, and for the first time she realized this mansion wasn't just her shelter. It was a tomb of memories, a place where Lucian had buried his heart. And she, though she didn't want to admit it, was being drawn deeper into his story, deeper than she had ever imagined. On the seventh night inside Lucian Vale's mansion, Scarlett couldn't sleep. She lay on the couch in the guest room, the firelight dancing across the ceiling, but her mind was trapped in the piano room, in Lucian's raspy voice as he spoke of Isabel. She saw him in every corner of this house, in the worn books, the portrait of the woman, the dust-covered piano. And what scared her the most was that she wasn't just curious about him anymore. She was drawn to him, deeply, helplessly. She got up, wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. The blizzard had quieted, leaving behind only the occasional hiss of wind slipping through the window panes. She heard a faint sound from the living room, where the fire still crackled. Lucian sat there in the armchair, a glass of red wine in hand. The firelight highlighted the sharp lines of his face and the depth in his eyes. In front of him sat a bottle and another glass, as if he'd known she would come. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice low, without looking up. Scarlett hesitated, then sat in the chair across from him. "You're not sleeping either," she replied, trying to sound steady despite her racing heart. She eyed the glass on the table. "Is that for me?" Lucian gave a rare smile, not mocking but enigmatic. "If you want it." He slid the glass toward her, his gaze never leaving hers. "But be careful. It's stronger than it looks." She took the glass and sipped. The wine was rich and bold, burning its way down her throat. "Is this what you always do?" she asked softly. "Sit alone, drink wine, and think about the past?" Lucian stared into the fire, silent for a while before answering. "Not always, but some nights, the past refuses to let me be." He took another sip, then looked at her. "What about you? What do you think about lying in that unfamiliar room?" Scarlett gripped her glass tighter, her eyes on the flames. She wanted to lie, to keep her distance, but the wine, or maybe just his presence, made her let go. "I think about my mother," she whispered. "She died when I was 10. She was the only one who ever really understood me. After that, my father turned me into something else, a perfect doll, for display, for contracts, for marrying a man I don't love." Lucian listened without interruption. When she fell silent, he spoke, voice deep and low. "You're more like your mother than you think. Isabel. She was like that too. She never let anyone decide her fate." Scarlett looked up, startled. "You knew my mother?" she asked, her voice shaking. He shook his head, but something unreadable passed through his eyes. "But I know people like you, people with hearts too big for the world to hold without crushing them." His words struck something deep inside her. Scarlett took another sip, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice bolder now. "What kind of heart do you have, Lucian? A broken one, or one that's already dead? He let out a dry chuckle, rough but not cruel. You're braver than I thought, Scarlett Donovan. He leaned forward and set his glass on the table. You want to know about my heart? It still beats, but it's learned not to feel. That's the only way it knows how to survive. Scarlett held his gaze, her voice trembling with emotion. That's not living, she said. That's existing. And I don't want that. Not for me, and not for you. The space between them thickened. Lucian looked at her. So long, so intensely, she felt like she might dissolve beneath his gaze. Then, as if something pulled him beyond his control, he reached for her hand. His touch was warm, strong, yet so gentle it was barely there. Scarlett felt her breath catch, her pulse stuttering. Lucien, she whispered, not even knowing what she meant to say. He didn't let her finish. He pulled her toward him, and before she could react, his lips met hers. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was fierce, hungry, as if they'd both held back too long. Scarlett felt the world vanish. Only his warmth remained, the taste of wine on his lips, the thunder of her own heartbeat. She responded, her hands finding his shoulders, clinging to him like she was afraid he'd disappear. The kiss deepened, pulling them into a whirlwind of emotion. But then, like lightning, reality struck. Scarlett broke away, breathless, panic in her eyes. No, she gasped, voice shaking. We can't. I can't. Lucian didn't move to stop her. His eyes still burned, but he let her go. What are you afraid of? He asked, voice rough. Me or yourself? Scarlett stood abruptly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders to the floor. Her heart felt torn in two. That kiss, it was more real than anything she'd ever experienced. And yet, it was dangerous. She didn't know who Lucian really was. She didn't know his past. And worse, she didn't know if she was strong enough to face what she felt. I have to go, she said, barely more than a whisper. The storm has passed. I can't stay here anymore. Lucian said nothing. He just looked at her, his expression a mix of pain and resolve. If you want to go, I won't stop you, he said quietly. But you know, Scarlett, running never solves anything. She turned and ran down the hall, slamming the bedroom door behind her. She collapsed onto the bed, covering her face, trying to hold back the tears. His kiss still burned on her lips, sweet, devastating. She knew he was right. She wasn't just running from her father or from James. She was running from herself. She looked toward the window where the first light of dawn broke through the snow. The road was clear. She could leave. But as she packed the few belongings she had, her heart felt unbearably heavy. Leaving meant leaving Lucian, leaving something she hadn't yet understood, but had already made her feel more alive than ever. Standing at the door, hand on the knob, she asked herself, do I really want to go? Or am I just trying to convince myself I should? After last night's kiss, Scarlett couldn't face Lucian. She avoided him, wandering through the mansion's cold hallways, trying to extinguish the fire still smoldering inside her. The snowstorm had passed. The road to the gate was now clear, but she remained, not because of the weather, but because part of her couldn't bring herself to leave him. She wasn't ready to walk away from the mystery of this house, and Lucian himself held tight. That morning, while Lucian was out checking the road, Scarlett found her way to the study, a room she hadn't explored before. The small space was lined with oak-paneled walls, filled with shelves of old books and the faint scent of aging paper. A soft light from the window fell across a wooden desk, where a carved wooden box lay quietly. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded red ribbon. The envelopes were wrinkled, the handwriting strong yet elegant. Her breath caught when she saw the signature at the bottom of one letter. L.V. Lucian Vale. His name cut through her thoughts like a blade. With trembling hands, she opened the first letter. It was dated 10 years ago, addressed to her father, Edward Donovan. The content was brief but icy. Edward, I've held up my end of the deal. If you go back on your word, there won't be a second time. L.V. Scarlett felt the blood drain from her face. She read on, each letter a piece of a story she had never known. Lucian and her father had once been business partners, investing in a massive financial venture. A younger Lucian had poured everything he had into the deal, trusting her father's word. Then came the final letter, the handwriting shakier and the words like a dagger. Edward, you betrayed me. You took everything. My money, my name, my future. I swear, no Donovan will ever set foot in my house again. LV. Scarlett collapsed into the chair, clutching the letters as if they were explosives. Lucian didn't just know her father. He had been destroyed by him. This mansion, his reclusive life, all of it was fallout from that betrayal. But what hurt the most was the kiss. He kissed her, knowing she was the daughter of the man who ruined him. What did it mean? Revenge or a moment of weakness? She heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Lucian entered, his coat still dusted with snow. His eyes darkened as they landed on the letters in her hands. You had no right to go through that, he said, his voice like ice. But she caught something else in his expression, a flicker of panic. No right? Scarlett stood, voice shaking with hurt and fury. You knew who I was from the beginning, didn't you? The daughter of Edward Donovan, the man who took everything from you. So why did you let me stay? Why did you... Her voice caught. Why did you kiss me? Lucian's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. You want the truth? He asked, stepping forward, forcing her to take a step back. I let you stay because I wanted to see Edward Donovan's daughter fall. I wanted to watch you break, like I did. His words landed like a punch. Scarlett's heart cracked, but she held his gaze. And the kiss? She asked, her voice low but sharp. Was that part of your revenge too? Lucian stopped just a few feet from her. He stared at her for what felt like an eternity before he finally spoke, his voice hoarse. No, that was my mistake. I didn't mean to feel anything for you. A wave of emotion crashed over her. Anger, grief, but also painful understanding. You say I'm the daughter of a traitor, she said, voice trembling. But I'm not my father, Lucian. I didn't know what he did to you, and I'm not here to pay for his sins. Lucian let out a bitter laugh, dry, almost hollow. You think that's enough? That you can walk into my life, stir up everything, and just leave like nothing ever happened? You don't understand, Scarlett. This house, this me, is all that was left after your father ruined me. Scarlett stepped toward him, despite the fear pulsing in her chest. Then tell me, she said, her voice steady. Tell me what happened. If you want me to understand, if you want me to leave, then give me the truth. Lucian's eyes flickered between anger and something far deeper. Pain. Finally, he turned away and leaned against the bookshelf. 10 years ago, he began, voice low, I was a young, ambitious investor. Your father and I partnered on a financial project. I trusted him, put everything I had into it. But he rigged the numbers, shifted the blame when it failed. He walked away with everything, my money, my reputation, my future. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. And Isabel, she couldn't take the pressure. She disappeared. I never found out if she was alive or dead. Scarlett stood frozen. She had always known her father was ruthless in business, but never imagined he had destroyed someone like this. I didn't know, she whispered, tears brimming. I'm sorry, Lucian, but you can't keep blaming me. I'm not him. Lucian turned back, eyes burning. You think I don't know that? He rasped. But every time I look at you, I see him, and I hate myself, because even knowing who you are, he stopped, voice cracking. I still wanted you to stay. Scarlett's heart thundered. Still what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, torn. Still wanted you here, he said, so softly she had to strain to hear. But I can't. No Donovan is welcome here. A deep ache spread in her chest. She wanted to scream, to tell him she was fighting too, that their kiss wasn't a mistake. But instead she nodded, her voice cold. I understand. I'll leave. Right now. She turned and walked out of the study, leaving the bundle of letters on the desk. But as she climbed the stairs to pack, her heart felt unbearably heavy. She wasn't just leaving Lucian. She was leaving a part of herself, a part she had discovered in this mansion, in his eyes. And she knew no matter how far she ran, what happened here would haunt her forever. Scarlett stood in the cold living room, a small suitcase at her feet. Dawn's pale light filtering through the window. The letters from the study haunted her still, every word carved into her heart like a reminder that she wasn't just Scarlett Donovan. She was the daughter of the man who had destroyed Lucian's life. Their kiss, those fleeting, shared moments, now felt like the remnants of a shattered dream. She realized she had been nothing more than a pawn in a long, cruel game. Her father the player, and Lucian the final casualty. She heard slow footsteps descending the stairs. Lucian appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, but with eyes full of inner conflict. He stopped at the doorway, keeping a distance between them, as if afraid getting any closer might break him. "You said you were leaving," he said, his voice deep, not as cold as before, but still guarded. "The road's clear now. You don't have to stay." Scarlett clenched her fists, steadying her voice. "Are you sending me away because I'm Edward Donovan's daughter? Or because you're afraid of something else?" she asked, her gaze locked on his. She needed him to say it, that the kiss wasn't a mistake, that he had felt the fire between them too. Lucian stared back, eyes stormy with things unsaid. "You want the truth?" he said, voice hoarse. "I don't hate you, Scarlett. I want to hate you. I want to blame you for everything your father did. But I can't, and that's why you have to go. Because if you stay, I'll—" He stopped, turning away as if the rest was too painful to speak aloud. "You'll what?" Scarlett stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You'll fall in love with me? You'll let yourself be happy? Why are you punishing yourself, Lucian? My father took your past, but you're letting him steal your future too." Lucian let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Happy?" he echoed, as if the word were foreign. "You don't understand, Scarlett. I don't deserve happiness. Not after everything I've lost. Not after what I failed to save. Isabel disappeared because I wasn't strong enough to protect her. And you—" His eyes found hers filled with pain. "You deserve someone better than me. Not a man who's just pieces of what he used to be." Scarlett's heart ached as if it were being torn in two. She wanted to scream, to tell him she didn't need perfect. She only needed him, his truth, his scars, his brokenness. But she knew he had built a wall too tall for her to break through. Not now, maybe not ever. "You're wrong," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not a pawn in my father's game, and I'm not Isabel. But if you want to push me away, if you want to keep living with your ghosts, then I'll go. Not because I'm weak, but because I respect your choice." She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door. Each step felt like carrying the weight of 1,000 pounds, like she was leaving behind a piece of her heart within these walls. Lucian didn't stop her, but she felt his eyes on her. A silent goodbye he couldn't bring himself to speak. When she opened the door, the cold wind swept in, bringing with it the scent of snow and loneliness. She turned one last time to look at him. "I hope one day," she said quietly, "you'll forgive yourself." Then she stepped out. The snow-covered path led her back to the rental car, now cleared and waiting. Scarlett drove away from the mansion without looking back, but tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She wasn't crying because she had been rejected, but because she now understood she had been the final link in a chain of tragedy between her father, Lucian, and Isabel. She had fled New York in search of freedom, but found something far more painful, in a man she couldn't stop thinking about. The drive back to the city was long and dull. When the skyline of New York finally emerged, she felt like a stranger returning to a world that no longer fit. She was no longer the obedient Donovan heiress. Lucian's kiss, the days inside that mansion, had changed her. She was stronger now, but her heart was also more fragile than ever. She stopped the car outside the Plaza Hotel, where everything had begun. Her phone buzzed. Dozens of messages from her father and James. But she didn't open them. She walked into the lobby, the glittering chandeliers above reminding her of the golden cage she had once called life. A staff member recognized her, whispered something to a colleague, but Scarlett didn't care. She went straight to the front desk and booked a room, for the first time in her life, using her own credit card, not her father's. In the hotel room, Scarlett sat by the window, staring at the city lights below. She thought of Lucian, How he hadn't pushed her away out of hate, but out of fear. Fear of loving again. Fear of losing again. She thought of Isabel, of the letters, of her father. She realized she hadn't just run from a wedding. She had run from a legacy of pain, but not anymore. She picked up her phone and typed a short message to her father. "I'm back, but things will be different. We need to talk." She hit send and turned the phone off. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. She would never be a pawn again. Lucian might choose to live in the past, but she would choose the future, no matter how painful. And as she closed her eyes, his image appeared, his stormy eyes, his searing kiss, and the rasp in his voice when he confessed he wanted her to stay. She didn't know if they would ever meet again, but one thing was certain. He had changed her, forever. With a broken but unyielding heart, Scarlett took a deep breath, ready for whatever waited beyond the next sunrise. Are you still following the story? Please leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below. All your comments are the motivation for us to create better stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. New York welcomed Scarlett with blinding lights and the blare of traffic, but she felt like a stranger in the city she once called home. When she stepped into the Donovan family penthouse, the scent of expensive perfume and the sterile glow of glass walls made it hard to breathe. Her father, Edward Donovan, stood in the living room, his gaze sharp as steel. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice low but heavy with authority. "Do you have any idea how much disgrace you've brought upon this family?" Scarlett stood tall, no longer bowing her head like she once would. "I needed time to think," she said calmly, firmly, "and I've thought it through." She said nothing about Lucian, nothing about the letters or the mansion in Maine, but inside her she carried both the pain and the strength those days had given her. Edward stepped closer, scrutinizing her like she was a chess piece he couldn't control. "Think?" he sneered. "You're the heir to the Donovan legacy, Scarlett. You don't get to think. You have a duty." He pointed to a newspaper on the table, its headline screaming, "Donovan heiress flees engagement. Scandal or secret?" "The media is tearing us apart. James has agreed to forgive the incident, but you will attend the press conference this afternoon and confirm the engagement." Scarlett glanced at the paper, then back at her father. She remembered Lucian, how he spoke of her father's betrayal, how he had been destroyed. But more than that, she remembered herself, the woman who had dared to run, to love, and to face the truth. "I'll go to the press conference," she said, voice calm and even. "But I won't say what you want me to." Edward's brow furrowed, but before he could respond, his phone rang. He turned away, leaving Scarlett standing in the silence of her defiance. She knew the real battle was still ahead. That afternoon, the Plaza Hotel once again became a media spectacle. Dozens of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights filled the room as Scarlett stepped into the conference. James stood beside her, his smile flawless but cold, like a portrait designed to please the public. Her father stood behind her, eyes commanding her to stay quiet and smile. But Scarlett was no longer the obedient daughter she had been a week ago. She had changed, and today she would prove it. When the microphone was passed to her, Scarlett took a deep breath. She looked out at the sea of faces, hungry for scandal. "I know you're all waiting for an explanation," she began, voice clear and steady. "I left the engagement party because I don't love James. I refuse to live a life that's been arranged for me, where my happiness is sacrificed for reputation or money." A murmur rippled through the room. James stiffened, his smile faltering. Edward stepped forward, trying to grasp her hand, but Scarlett pulled away, her gaze unwavering. "Scarlett," he hissed under his breath, a warning. "Don't be foolish." But she didn't stop. She thought of Lucian, of the scars her father left on him. She thought of her mother, who once said freedom is worth more than any diamond. And she thought of the girl who had walked into a strange mansion and found her strength there. "I'm not just refusing this marriage," she said, her voice rising into the silence. "I'm refusing to live by anyone else's script. The Donovan name may stand for power, but I am not a possession. I am Scarlett, and I choose to live as myself." The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed wildly. James turned away, his face red with fury. Edward's fists clenched, his eyes blazing. But Scarlett wasn't afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt free. Not the freedom of running, but the freedom of standing in her truth. Then, after the press conference, Scarlett walked out of the hotel, leaving her father and James behind to deal with the media storm. She walked through the streets of New York, neon lights reflecting on the rain-slicked pavement. Her phone buzzed nonstop, messages from friends, her father's lawyers, strangers. But she didn't care. She had shattered the golden cage, and no matter how uncertain the future felt, she knew she would never go back. She stopped in front of a small cafe, its warm golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. She stepped inside, ordered a cup of hot tea, and sat by the window. As the warmth seeped into her hands, she thought of Lucian. She wondered what he was doing, if he still sat by the fireplace, clinging to memories of Isabel, or if he had finally found some light in his darkness. She didn't regret leaving, but she did regret not telling him that she loved him, not for being a hero or a villain, but for simply being Lucian, with all his wounds and quiet strength. Scarlett pulled a piece of paper from her coat and scribbled a few simple lines. Lucian, I stood up for myself today. I hope one day you'll do the same. Thank you for showing me I'm stronger than I thought. She folded the paper and slipped it into her purse, not to send, but to keep. A reminder, because even if she never saw him again, he had become part of her, not a scar, but a flame that reminded her she could survive any storm. She took a sip of tea, staring out at the crowded street. New York wasn't a prison anymore. It was a door to a future she would write for herself. And though her heart still ached when she thought of Lucian, she smiled because she knew she had chosen right. Not just for today, but for the life ahead. 2 weeks after the explosive press conference, Scarlett Donovan stood in the middle of her new apartment in Brooklyn, a small but warm space that was entirely her own. Unopened boxes lay scattered across the floor, signs of a new life just beginning. She had cut ties with her father, refused every cent from the Donovan estate, and started working at a nonprofit. Humble work, but it made her feel alive. And yet, even with freedom in her hands, her heart remained heavy every time she thought of Lucian Vale. Every night she dreamed of the mansion in Maine, of his deep, haunted eyes, the fierce kiss they shared, and the rasp in his voice when he admitted he wanted her to stay. She wondered where he was now, whether he was still living with Isabel's ghosts, or if he had found some sliver of light. She didn't regret leaving, but she did regret not telling him that she loved him. Not because he had saved her, but because he had helped her see herself. That morning, a small package arrived at her apartment. No return address. Scarlett's heart raced as she opened it and found an old envelope, the handwriting strong and elegant. Lucian. Inside was a letter and a small key engraved with the image of a piano. With trembling hands, she unfolded the letter. Every word cut into her like a sweet, aching blade. Scarlett, by the time you read this, I will have sold the mansion and left Maine. I don't know where I'm going, only that I can't stay in that place anymore, where every corner reminds me of Isabel, and now of you. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing to say the things I didn't have the courage to say when you were still here. I was wrong to push you away. I said it was because you were Edward Donovan's daughter, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that if I let myself love you, I'd lose you, like I lost Isabel. You were right. I live among ghosts, and I've let them drag me down. But you, Scarlett, you were the light I never expected. You made me want to live again, if only for a few fleeting moments. That kiss wasn't a mistake. It was the realest thing I've felt since Isabel disappeared. I love you, Scarlett, but I don't deserve you. You are fire, and I am ash. I let you go because I wanted you to have the life you deserve, a life I didn't think I could give you. This key belongs to the piano. I left it behind with the new owners, but I wanted you to have the key as a reminder that music in your heart can open doors I never dared to touch. Thank you for walking into my life, even if it was only during a storm. Lucian. Scarlett clutched the letter to her chest, tears falling silently. The pain was sharp, but so was the release. He loved her. She had suspected but never dared to fully believe it. And now he was gone, leaving her with a key and words that felt like a quiet, final goodbye. She thought of those days in the mansion, the way he had looked at her as she played Claire de Lune, the way his hand had found hers before that kiss. He wasn't Ash. He was a man with a broken heart, but one still strong enough to love, even if he didn't believe he was worthy. She rose to her feet, wiped her tears, and held the small key in her hand. It was tiny, but it held weight. Lucian may have believed he didn't deserve her, but she didn't believe that. She had fled New York to find freedom, and now she would run toward him, not to save him, but to show him that both of them were worthy of love. She called a friend in real estate, asking for help tracking the sale of the mansion in Maine. A few hours later, she had an answer. The estate had been sold. The broker didn't have an exact address, but said Lucian had traveled to a small coastal town not far from Portland, a place called Haven's End. Scarlett didn't hesitate. She packed a small bag, slipped the piano key into her coat pocket, and booked a bus ticket to Maine. This time she wasn't running away. She was running toward what she wanted, for the sake of her own heart. On the bus, Scarlett gazed out the window as the landscape blurred beneath the sunset. She thought of her mother, who once said love is the only thing worth fighting for. She thought of Lucian, how he had turned away from happiness because he feared losing it. She wouldn't let him do that again. She would find him, even if she had to knock on every door in Haven's End. And when she did, she would tell him she loved him, not because he needed to hear it, but because she needed to say it. She held the key tightly, feeling the intricate carvings under her fingers. It wasn't just the key to a piano, it was the key to a door they had both closed, a door to a future where they could heal together. Scarlett smiled, painful but hopeful. She didn't know what waited in Haven's End, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't turn back. Not now. Not ever. She would no longer live a half-life. As the bus rolled through the snow-covered roads, she closed her eyes and saw Lucian's face. Those deep, dark eyes, that rare, aching smile, and the rasp of his voice when he said her name. She didn't know if she would find him, but she knew she wouldn't stop. Not for him, but for herself, for the love she had found, and would never let go. Haven's End, a small coastal town in Maine, where waves lapped gently at rocky shores and weathered wooden homes stood silent beneath the autumn sky. Scarlett stepped off the bus, her breath curling in the cold air, her hand wrapped tightly around the piano key, Lucian's final gift. She had no address, no real lead, only a name and the unshakable belief that she would find him. She walked along cobblestone streets, asking around at the cafe, the general store, the harbor. An old boat repairman looked up at her and smiled. "You looking for the guy who just moved in down by the far end of the beach?" he asked. "He's been working on boats at the docks lately." Scarlett nodded, heart pounding, with a mix of hope and fear. The old man pointed the way and she followed, boots crunching over gravel, until she reached a small wooden cabin, smoke curling softly from the chimney. She knocked. Her heart thudded wildly. Lucian opened the door, tall, tousled dark hair, and those stormy eyes wide in disbelief. He wore a gray sweater, still carrying that rugged magnetic aura. "Scarlett?" His voice was hoarse, like he didn't believe what he was seeing. What? What are you doing here?" Scarlett smiled even though her whole body trembled. "I read your letter," she said gently but firmly. "I'm not here to apologize or argue. I'm here because there's something you need to know." Lucian stepped back, holding the door open, his eyes wary. "The truth?" he said quietly. "You already did enough, Scarlett. You stood up for yourself, just like you said you would. Why come back?" She stepped inside. The cabin smelled of burning wood and sea salt, a modest wooden table, a few books, a window overlooking the surf. She turned to face him. "Because I love you," she said, her voice trembling but certain. "Not because I need you to save me, or because I want to fix you. I love you, Lucian, with all your scars and all your pain. And I can't let you keep running from me like you're running from yourself." Lucian stood frozen, his eyes flickering between ache and longing. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I'm not who you think I am. I let Isabel go. I let the past destroy me. I can't give you a palace. I can't give you the life you deserve. Scarlett stepped closer, now only a few feet from him. I don't want a palace, she said, voice steady. I lived in one my whole life, and it was just a cage. I choose the ashes, Lucian. If you're in them, then that's where I want to be. Her words shattered the last of his walls. Lucian looked at her, his eyes burning, and whispered, Scarlett, like her name was a prayer. But before he could say more, she moved. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it race beneath her palm. Then she rose on her toes, pulled him down, and kissed him. It was deep and fierce, a kiss full of promises and broken pieces finally fitting together. Lucian wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he was afraid she'd disappear. They kissed there in the cabin, with the waves crashing beyond the window, as if the world had narrowed down to only the two of them. When they finally broke apart, Lucian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I don't deserve you, he whispered, voice raw. But I love you, Scarlett. I've loved you since the first time you played Claire de Lune. I was too afraid to admit it, afraid I'd hurt you. Scarlett smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. You can't hurt me more than I've already hurt myself, she said. But we can heal, together. Not because we're perfect, but because we choose each other. He opened his eyes, looking at her with a tenderness she had never seen in him before. Are you sure, he asked. This life, this cabin, this town, it's not New York. No lights, no spotlight. She took his hand and laughed softly. I never wanted the lights. I want you. And I want us to write a new song. Not Claire de Lune, but one that's ours. Lucian laughed, a warm, free sound, and pulled her into his arms. A new song, he repeated. I can't promise it'll be perfect, but I promise I'll try. For you. 1 year later, the cabin in Haven's End was now filled with light and music. A small piano sat in the corner, a gift from Scarlett to Lucian. Every evening they played together. Simple melodies, sometimes clumsy, but full of love. They didn't erase the past. Isabel was still part of Lucian, just as Scarlett's mother was part of her. But they learned to live with the memories, no longer prisoners of them. Scarlett worked remotely for the nonprofit, bringing hope to those who needed it most. But Lucian, he had rediscovered his old fire. After months in Haven's End, he started a small business, not with the reckless ambition of youth, but with quiet purpose. He partnered with local fishermen, building a sustainable seafood brand. It wasn't $1 million empire, but it was his, a way to rebuild faith in himself, a way to prove he wasn't just ashes. Scarlett watched him with pride, from mornings spent calculating at the kitchen table to evenings when he returned home smelling of salt and wind, smiling with joy. This is who you are, she once told him, when he worried his business wasn't big enough. Not because of its size, but because you built it with your heart. Today they stood hand in hand on the beach, watching the sun set in flames across the sea. Lucian turned to her, his eyes soft. You know, he said, voice low, I used to think I'd never get back up after what your father did. But you made me want to try again. You made me want to really live. Scarlett rose on her toes and kissed him gently. You didn't get back up for me, she whispered. You did it for yourself. And that's why I love you. He smiled, pulling her close, waves lapping at their feet. My girl, he murmured, do you ever regret choosing this pile of ashes? She shook her head, smiling through tears. Never, because this pile of ashes is my home. They built a life from ruins, a wooden cabin, a small business, a shared piano melody. Some nights they sat by the fire, sharing dreams and fears. Some mornings they argued over nothing, then made up with a kiss. Lucian no longer hid in the dark. Scarlett no longer ran from herself. They healed each other, not through grand gestures, but through quiet moments. A held hand, a song shared, a day's work side by side. Under the sky of Haven's End, they wrote a new future. No palaces, no titles, just real love. And a Lucian who had finally found himself, not to prove anything to the world, but to prove quietly, powerfully to his own heart that he was worthy of joy.